I've been fascinated with art and music my entire life. In my adult life, I've been blessed to have met so many immensely talented visual and musical artists. Many from here in my own backyard. Kansas City has an abundant wealth of talented creators of original art. Join me, William Saunders, on a journey to illuminate the hidden architecture of creativity, how artists see, feel, imagine, and realize their inner worlds by engaging in open, exploratory dialogue. By bridging the rational and the intuitive, we aim to inspire fellow creators and curious audiences to appreciate the deeper forces behind visual and musical expression.
Inside the Creative Mind with your host, William Saunders.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Creative Mind. I'm William Saunders, and today I am joined by the one-of-a-kind, the illustrious Angela Carole Brown. And Angela Carole Brown right there is one of my favorite artists, period, because of how many things she does and how many things she does well. I think audiences, I think you guys are going to freak out when you see the breadth and depth of what my friend can do. And we're going to talk a little bit in depth about her brand new book, How the Light Gets In, 10 Principles for Reclaiming Your Spirit. And it will help you do just that. So we'll get a little bit more into that. But before as I was looking at the refreshing myself with the book this morning, I was looking in here and I was like, I think I take it not for granted, but I don't think it's publicized enough, just to my point about the breadth and depth of what you really have put out there. I mean, look at this. This is really like the 8th book that you're the author of or published in, 11 albums, 6 short films, an Alcohol Inc. artist. So it's like almost like what don't you do is probably a better statement, because I've seen so many of these. And the one thing I am going to also talk about is the Day of the Dead dolls too. I don't think too many people know much about that either, but we'll get a chance to take a look at all of these and talk a little bit more about all that in depth. But before we get started, how about just a little Angela Carole Brown introduction from you, just a little bit for anybody who's not familiar with you, who you are, how you got to Kansas City, and then a little bit more in depth about your background.
Awesome. Thank you, William. I'm Angela Carole Brown, born and raised in Los Angeles, and now a Kansas City transplant as of about 5 years ago. Looking for more art, I guess. I've always created art. Whether for my living or just for love. Always it's just for love, but some part of my life it got to be for a living, and I'll always be grateful for that. So I came here looking for the same, and Kansas City is a really wonderful city when it comes to supporting artists and the arts, and so I couldn't be in a better city, really. And in fact, I would say in a certain avenue of my artistic life, I've had far more opportunities come my way just in the 5 years I've been here than I ever had in LA. So no complaints. But yeah, I've always created. That's just what's in me.
It is. And I appreciate that about you too, because, obviously I've seen a lot of this, but, so much of it I probably haven't. But I knew you first as, obviously a coworker, but first as a singer. That was the first thing I knew about you, was that you were this jazz singer, and you spent a lot of time, building that reputation and, in a name for yourself in Los Angeles. With that said, I don't think too many people know so much about the
Orchestra Surreal.
Orchestra Surreal. Thank you for that. I couldn't, for the life of me, I was sitting here trying to think of what the heck is the name of this thing. Yeah, which I'm going to put an image of that up here in the background. Tell people a little bit about that and what that was like, because that seems like it was like a pretty big portion of your life and your professional experience.
Yeah, the Orchestra Surreal, I was with that outfit for 28 years before I retired last year, doing my last gig in June of 2024. The Orchestra Surreal is, these days it's a 30-piece orchestra. I think it was slightly smaller when we first began it. And it's the brainchild of Ross Wright, who's a musician in Los Angeles and composer. And yeah, it's a traditional orchestra that's augmented by a rhythm section so that we can bridge the gap between classical music and pop and jazz, and that is the gimmick of the orchestra. It it hybrids these various genres of music in really ingenious ways. I used to, and other people have said this to Ross too, but just by the juxtaposition, Ross would create between a classical piece and a classic rock song and maybe a snippet of a television show theme. All of a sudden, he's made this political statement. I mean, it's so genius because nothing is overt, and yet it becomes really obvious when you listen to the whole thing. It's been a really fun project, but also strenuous musically. He writes the most complicated charts I've ever experienced, and far more experienced musicians than myself have said the same thing. Like, dude, this is tough for a guitar player. This is, why do you make violins do this? That kind of stuff. And yet it's genius music. So I was the lead singer for about the first 5 or 6 years of it until we then brought in a male singer. And then it was myself and the guy, Dangerous Dan O'Callahan. And yeah, it was kind of like a circus because we all played these characters and we dressed wildly and put on these personas and sing and play really difficult and really fun music.
I wish I could have seen it at the Warwick when it was there. Obviously that was a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
My question is music your first artistic love? Is that the first thing you fell in love with?
It's not. As a consumer, probably so. I loved listening to music, and I have an older sister. She's about a decade older than me, who hipped me, though she is not a musician, hipped me to some of the hippest music ever. She just, she had a knack for finding. She hipped me to Jimi Hendrix. She hipped me to John Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders. This is, and so very early on, I got a good education. My stepdad hipped me to big band and the torch singers and the crooners. And so I got this really wide berth of experience of music, and I fell in love with music. So as a consumer, I would say that probably was the first. As an artist, I started writing long before I ever started pursuing music. Although I, was a piano student for most of my childhood, but again, I think writing was the first, and it's turning out to be the last.
So you kind of hit on this, and I'm just kind of curious. What other music do you recall? Like, what are some of your earliest memories of music being in your household?
Well, my parents were big music lovers. And like I say, my sister was. So music was everywhere all the time. I mean, I remember as a kid listening to Johnny Mathis and listening to, the Count Basie Orchestra and listening to Herbie Hancock. It was just so wild. And then, of course, as a teenager and what all my friends liked, I loved Heat Wave. And of course, I loved the Jackson 5 as a really small child. And so it just ran the gamut. The gambit? Gamut. One of those is right. It just, I just was saturated with music my whole life. And my mother hipped me to the wonderful opera singers, especially the Black women. If she could find a Black woman, a opera singer, she was all over that. And she'd say, come listen to this, people like Marian Anderson and Leontine Price, and then the gospel singers like Mahalia Jackson, my mother, very much. So I got this influence all around me, which I'm so grateful for.
Who would you say the first author that you fell in love with was?
Well, very, very early on, I remember my stepdad hipped me to this series. I'm not going to remember the name of the series now. But there were probably about 8 or 10 books that began with a book called The Bastard. That's all I remember. God, I wish I could remember the name of this author. John Jakes. And, I don't know that he ever did much other than this particular series. Honestly, I don't know. But that was my first sort of, get into books and then get into a series and follow a whole lineage and follow a whole story, through several books. And my stepdad hipped me to that. But, my mother allowed me to read very grown-up books at a young age. So she's probably going to turn over in her grave that I'm about to say this, but she let me read a book called Pimp, which was a memoir by this former pimp named Iceberg Slim, and it became a cult classic. I was like 12, and she let me read it, and there was all kinds of stuff in that book, as you can imagine. But my mother was like, hey, she's going to live in the grown-up world. Might as well hip her to what to expect.
I thought you were going to tell me that book was by Wayne Brady.
It might as well have been.
Oh, no, Dave, we got an ATM right over here.
That is the best sketch ever.
Oh, that's so crazy. Dave Chappelle. Oh, you're crazy, crazy, crazy dude. Do you recall the first music you ever purchased with your own money? You said, this is what I got to have this. Do you recall what that was?
I remember my very first 45 that I purchased myself, and that was ABC by the Jackson 5.
Awesome.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Awesome. It would be more difficult for me to try to remember the first book I purchased of my own. I'm pretty sure it probably wasn't anything that was like a fiction or anything else like that. It was probably nonfiction and probably instructional, knowing me.
Sure.
Yeah. But do you recall what the first book you ever spent your own money on that you took home?
I do. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee.
Oh,
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
And the movie already existed by the time I was old enough to start being interested in books. But I loved the story so much. And my mother was like, if you liked the movie, read the book. And, she hipped me to, joking aside about Pimp and Iceberg Slim, but she really did hit me to great classics. Yeah. And that was my first purchase, was To Kill a Mockingbird.
That's awesome. One of the things I try to do here with this is I'm hoping that young, aspiring artists will tune into this and pick up something that is either inspirational or that they can have some insight into, what the struggle is to get yourself a name and get yourself started and trying to, get your feet underneath you. And I think it would be is based on what I know of the orchestra surreal stuff. And the thing I don't know is what your beginnings were when you very first started singing, what your first gig was. Do you recall what that first gig was? Because I do think it's important that young artists realize that you don't start at the middle. You don't really start at the top. You really got to cut your teeth.
Yeah, I do remember some friends and I from in college who, some of us sang a little bit and some of us played a little piano, and I have some drumsticks. We formed a band, and we were already out of college by the time this happened, but we're like early 20s, and we decided to start a band, and we just played a lot in somebody's garage for a long time, and then we finally booked a gig, and it was at this gay club in West Hollywood, and we were doing, all covers. Nobody was writing any music. We were doing a lot of like, what's the guy's name? It was during the electronic age of music, like Thomas Dolby. We covered a Thomas Dolby song, and
Howard Jones.
yes, Talking Heads.
Yeah.
And we were just green as all get out. But we booked a club. It was a dive. It was a little, it was a little seedy, and we just were on top of the world. That's how we felt, on top of the world. And we gigged for quite a few years before we all kind of dispersed. Yeah, that was fun.
Awesome.
Very grown up suddenly.
Yeah, that'll do it once you get out there. So if you had to say who your is there a musical influence that you would say is probably higher than or larger than other artists, or is there anybody you can really point to that says, yeah, they really influenced me probably the most?
Yeah. There's two I would put as synonymous. I mean, as equal, not synonymous. They're very different from each other, but equal in terms of their impact on my life. The first is Ella Fitzgerald. And that is purely from a vocal and technical standpoint. I wanted her voice, and I wanted what her voice could do. And as a result, I've never scatted as a result of having that much respect, because I went, unless I can do it as well as her, I ain't touching it.
Right.
But
yeah,
she was how I tried to fashion myself vocally. And oh my God, she can do everything. Her voice was, our voices are instruments, but she operated like she was a jazz trumpeter or something. Like she knew all those intervals. That's why she understood harmony, and that's why she was so brilliant at scatting. And the other one, from a different perspective, is Tom Waits. Tom Waits, because of the storyteller that he is.
Right.
And the first time I ever heard him, and it was the album Swordfish Trombones, I remember being so blown away. I'd never quite heard anyone take me on a journey in listening to a song. And I went, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I was already trying to write books, even as early on as I discovered him. So I already had that inside of me of I'm a storyteller. But then to hear it done through song, I went, whoa. So this isn't just about what groovy harmonics I can do and what intervals, it's about connecting emotionally with an audience through telling a story. And that's what he gave me in terms of impact.
What about as a poet? Is there anybody that really stands out who is a poet that really kind of set you on your course?
Alice Walker was an early love. Of course, she writes plays and book and fiction, and she writes everything. But her poetry, very much so. Maya Angelou, of course.
One of the things that since we mutually worked for a theater company, and theater is one of those things where it's like it can combine so many of these aspects, good writing, good storytelling, good music if it's a musical and whatnot. But as much as I think theater is it has it's a in-person thing, an experience like that. But film is, to me, has always been the ultimate frontier for me. It's always been something that I always, no matter, what I was doing, if it's, trying to learn to be a better photographer, learning to be a better, songwriter, all those things in the back of my mind, I've always held it in my head that the ultimate destination for these things is going to be film. At some point, I don't care if I'm 80 years old, I'm going to do a full-length film. I don't care. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And so when I was looking at the list of, these short films that you've done, in which, some are award-winning, I felt like, wow, this is really kind of cool. It's kind of like a step up. I don't know would you say that if you had your druthers, would you kind of consider to be at that pinnacle? Would it be something that you would produce for live theater? Because I know you're also a playwright. Or would it be something that would be in film form?
I would love to be a filmmaker. I don't know that that's in my future. But I fantasize all the time. Anytime I see a great film, I go, God, I wish I directed that, written that, whatever. You know, we have that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I really like, I'm not a playwright, by the way, sir. I've been writing one that I'm still writing and rewriting.
But it's almost there, right? I mean, you're going to be able to add that to the
I hope so.
to the little feather in the cap there.
I think, I don't know, I may insult some playwrights out there in saying this right now, and I'm not really one. So, all I can say is what I think. But it seems to me that producing a play is easier than producing a movie, that writing a piece of theater is easier than writing a script, just because there's so much technologically involved in filmmaking. And yes, there's technology involved in producing a play, but far less. And I think that intimidates me. So I think my default cowardice's choice would be to do theater. And again, I'm not at all intending to demean theater. I think it's one of our highest art forms.
Right.
But I think as far as someone trying to do it, I'm less intimidated by theater than I would be by film.
Yeah, and when I say that, before it's all over with, that I'll end up doing, a film. It probably would not be, and maybe I could be wrong, but at least when I try to center it in my head, it's probably going to be something like a documentary or something.
Oh,
that
yeah.
extent, yeah.
Yeah.
But all the music videos and the short film about Coda and stuff like that are all stuff that that I'm using as kind of a background to try to get ready, try to do something a little bit more expanded. And so the children's story, or that you did the animation for, or I'm sure there's something that is going to be a project that's in your future. I can see it. I mean, you're too good at doing the shorter form to not do something maybe a little bit expanded. So I, as also a not just a friend, but a fan, I'm hoping that I see one of those Angela Carole Brown projects out there sometime in the future.
I actually have an idea in my head for the next little, because mine are little nuggets, The children's thing is about 30 minutes long, but everything else is like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But I did one called the Sanctuary Project, and it was a documentary short, and it was just me asking people, the question was, where do you go when life is feeling overwhelmed to find your peace? And however people answered, I was just filming them with my iPhone, and I strung that together, and I made this little documentary short. And I have these visions of doing a similar thing, like the Kansas City version. I have these visions of that. And I would have to decide what question I was going to ask everyone this time. And it would be cool to link it to, the themes that are going on with how the light gets in. Yeah.
Right. Well, I can, not that I want to give away how I'm intending to, to do this in the near future, but at least in my head, this is the way that I would produce a documentary based upon creativity.
Yeah.
Is I want to expand what I'm doing with the series to also talk to psychologists and child psychologists to see how creativity forms early in early childhood and whatnot, but also take the answers to these questions, like when we start talking about the book a little later on, in depth, in kind of the deep dive on it, one of the things I ask is how, the inception portion of it, how the idea come about for this. When I start getting the enough body of work with enough artists, both visual artists and musical artists, my intention is to at least take a lot of those core answers about the process and then combine them together, so you have a bunch of different people talking about all about where ideas come from and how they get an idea off the ground. And then, also, how, at the tail end of that, the life cycle, how does the relationship with a piece of work, mature, or how does it change over time after it's already out there? All those answers and stuff like that, eventually I'm hoping for, that'll turn into a short, or if not a little bit longer form film about the creative process, once I feel like I've got enough of body of work to turn it into that, which I'm hoping for. So let's talk a little bit about the book, and then I want to talk a little bit about it in general, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll go in depth about the different life cycle pieces of this. So the book is called How the Light Gets In: 10 Principles for Reclaiming Your Spirit. And it's a I'm going to hold it up here so everybody can see. Here's my copy of the book. It is not thick. It's a short read, but it is a very powerful read. I was telling you that before we actually got on here. And I think the thing that I would encourage everybody to know about this book, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to tell you my interpretation of what this book means, and also the salient nature of why it's so important at this particular juncture in time. It's really about, a little bit of coping mechanisms and how to just reclaim a little joy in a world that's chaotic, a world that is, has a lot of uncertainties and a lot of anxieties. It's how to just survive, basically, by using some very simple and in some easy things that you can incorporate into your life that allows you to just have a little zen, a little bit of peace, and not choke a bitch. Am I right about that?
Yes. That's great. I'm going to use that as a quote for my promo.
And what I mean by that, folks, is just, I just mean that, you're not going to freak out, on anybody, or, lose your cool or do anything else like that. That's just that's us being funny. We know each other like that. So,
yes.
So is that fair? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. I think that's spot on, especially, describing it as coping mechanisms. That's what they all are. But I try to find everyday things that could be used as a coping mechanism, because behind it all really is the concept of mindfulness. Doing anything mindfully is going to help bring some zen to your life. Doing anything mindfully. I just chose these particular 10. There's so many more out there, but I chose these particular 10 as a way to say, look, here are simple things we probably all already do, but utilizing them in very mindful ways is a great coping mechanism, as opposed to the coping mechanism of, I think I'm going to go do some meth right now so I don't have to think about the world. Because there's coping mechanisms also.
Right. And, everybody feels like a need to try to escape the pressures of some of this at some point, So yes, and I did think it was, I think I mentioned this before, but I need to get copies for my kids, because I think that it would be something that I think that they could find to be useful. And you've met two, excuse me, two of the three of them. As I was making notes for this, I was writing down. I originally was just going to take a few of the 10 and and ask you specifically some questions about a few of these, and I counted them just while you were talking to see how many I actually wrote down, and I wrote down 9 of the 10. So that's kind of that's kind of defeats the purpose. So maybe we'll just touch on a little bit of each one of them. Create even though you don't consider yourself an artist. I think that's really cool about the fact that, even if you just find something that you can do, in creation, can mean a lot of different things. For me, it could be just a hobby. It's something as simple as, and we've talked about this before. I view cooking
Yes.
to be an art form,
Yes.
especially, what you put into it. Anything's what you put into it. But the idea would be that you're making something out of nothing, and how rewarding that can be, not just for yourself, but for other people around you too. It's giving back to the world in a way. In my own mind, is if I create, I'm putting something out there that's just, it's not mine. I'm just the conduit for it. I'm just channeling this and putting it out there it's supposed to be. It may not be for me, maybe for somebody else. And I found that to be true a lot of times with stuff you create. It's not necessarily for you. A lot of times it is, and it can be very it can be therapy for yourself to do these things. But a lot of times you find that sometimes, like if it's a piece of artwork, or if it's a poem, or if it's a song, that somebody else gets something from it very much more so than you. So my point that I was going to ask you about this is would you agree with me that especially with this particular point, that a lot of times there's a side benefactor. There's somebody who's going to benefit from it that's not just yourself.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's the point. I mean, what I create, whether it's composing a song or writing a story or doing the alcohol inks, first and foremost, there's something in me that wants to come out. Secondly, whatever does come out might take me in one direction or another. And if I listen to it, it's probably going to give me a better result than if I insist that it listen to me. And thirdly, there's usually something going on in my own life, in my own heart, that is bringing me to the pen, that is bringing me to the paintbrush, that is bringing me to the microphone. So I think it does begin with what's happening with you inside. But the result of it, the fact that it could move or impact someone else who hears it, sees it, reads it, whatever, that's such a privilege to know that you have been able to provide. It's such a privilege. And man, I think there's no greater calling, honestly, than creating something and putting it out there in the public sphere that impacts someone else in a way you may not even ever learn. But it's such a privilege to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on all that. Then the other next note I made was in reference to play and rest.
Yes.
I've got the play down pretty well. It's the rest part that is I think, not just for myself, but I think is almost at epidemic levels within our country. So many people are suffering from insomnia or the lack of really good sleep. And, some of it's, when you don't know where your next rent check's going to come from, you don't know where, if you got a child in the military, and you're worried about, the state of the world, if you're worried about your finances, worried about, there's so many things that can impact that it makes it so hard to genuinely just get rest, which brings me to one of the other 10, which is meditation.
Mhm.
And I find it that, that for people who are curious about meditation, who don't already practice it, it doesn't have to be some great elaborate thing. And I love the way you kind of make a point of emphasizing that in the book, about sometimes it's just about silence and silencing your mind, allowing your mind to just get those thoughts out, and allowing, a little bit of emptiness to kind of creep in, and so you can just be calm and be present and be silent for just a little while. And even that kind of resting your worry, resting your anxiety, it's just, I mean, not everybody can do it, but I do find that those things were kind of a little bit integrated with one another. If you're not getting good sleep, start trying to meditate, please.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, I could have written a much longer chapter on the meditation part, because there are certainly, there are avenues about meditation that talk about things even deeper than trying to calm down. That one of the points of meditation is to get quiet and to get still so that you can face yourself. And sometimes that is painful. Sometimes that is difficult. Sometimes we resist it. So it isn't, if you start going into the real deeper dive about meditation, it isn't just, Zen and peace. However, even if you get into the whole deeper dive of what meditation can do, all of that has the end result, if you're willing, of clearing and cleansing. And I think we all can use that. Like I say, that's the deeper dive of it. And really all I wanted to accomplish with this particular principle in this book is, don't make it difficult for yourself. Don't make it, oh, I have to do this deep thing. Don't. Just get silent. Get silent, and your brain will kind of do this. It won't necessarily just calm down for you. That's okay. Let it. That's the mindful aspect. It's actually very important, because the more you try to clear the brain, the less it will work. So you just let and you observe. You're a witness to your own body and mind. You're a witness to the damn crick in your hip because you've been sitting a certain way for a few minutes, and you're a witness to the crazy that goes on in your noggin about work and this person and that thing, and just be a witness. And because what all of that does is it creates a state of surrender, and the state of surrender is the doorway to being able to find some calm.
I imagine that in my own household, I must sound like a total crazy person, because there are times when I'm just trying to just center myself and just, just exhale and just take a deep breath, try to let my mind, just expel all the craziness, and just let myself be silent for a while.
Right.
And inevitably, something will rush in that is this incredible idea. And inevitably, I will always talk to myself as though I'm like in third person, of saying stuff like, oh, wow, you know what? That's a great idea. And I'll pause what I'm doing and write that down, or do something but it's like, Rebecca would be like, who are you talking to? Nobody. I'm just talking to, the self that's in there. So, which brings me to another aspect of this, which is, I found there would be a lot of these things were correlated, with one another. And I love that you talked about commune with nature. And you and I have talked at length about this, about how, in my own life, I felt like I had a very, very deep and rich connection with nature that somehow I lost it. I didn't feel nature like I did when I was younger and spent so much time, in nature. But now
Right.
that I've kind of restarted, more camping, more fishing, being more outdoors, the dogs help a lot because I have to get out, with them and walk them a lot. And we do like to take a little adventurous walks. We had a nice little hike today.
Yeah.
And I do feel like nature does multiple things for the soul. One, it allows you to be in creation, but the other thing it allows me, at least me, to do is I get a lot of those thoughts that I needed to get out while I'm in, walking, or whatever it is I'm doing, taking a hike or whatever it is. And I feel like that tie with nature, the more I spend with nature, the better I sleep. On the nights when I do get out and get a nice long nature walk in, I sleep better those nights, and I do feel better rested. And I think it's just good for my psyche. I think a little bit of what's going on with that. So I would recommend anybody, if you're feeling like there's a lot of stress going on in your life, get to a park, get to the beach, get to a forest, get to a mountain, get to a stream. And one thing I find interesting is I a lot of times when I'm on these trails or something like that, I'll see, hikers or runners or just people walking, and they have, headphones. Sometimes they have big headphones like these, these over-the-ear headphones.
Right.
And I never do that. And the reason why I don't, it's not that I don't enjoy listening to music or something like that if I was going to walk. The reason I don't is because I want to hear everything. I want to hear the trees. I want to hear the wind. I want to hear nature sounds. I want to hear the insects. I want to hear birds. I want to hear any of that, because to me, it's a little bit of the sensory experience with nature, to have all that, intaking all of that. And it does more for me than it would if I was listening to, whatever,
Right.
any type of music while I'm doing that.
Right.
Just a thought.
That's very cool. Yeah.
And then the next one that I made a note on was the forgive and ask forgiveness.
Yes.
I think in general, this may be one of the harder things to fully understand as an adult, because we've all had people trespassing on us, and sometimes the hardest thing to do is to not just say the words "I forgive you," but to generally in your heart forgive somebody.
Right.
But I feel like when you do, it frees you. And to your point about it's not about them, it's about you. It's your own peace. It's your own serenity. Carrying resentment, carrying anger, carrying all these things really is just it's on your back. You're the one carrying it around. If you can offload that, then you're weightless and you're free of those things. Honor a daily gratitude ritual. The Michael Beckwith quote that you put in the book: you can't bring anything new into your life until you are grateful for what you have now.
Yes.
I love that. I just thought that was just so spot on.
Right.
And gratitude's another aspect of that. It's like, for years when I was younger, even though I would tell myself that I was happy for other people, I found that I struggled with, like, well, how'd they get that deal? How'd they, get that promotion? How'd they get that? And feeling, either sorry for myself or envious or whatever. And something somewhere along the lines changed to where I could truly, genuinely be happy for somebody, somebody's success that has nothing to do with me, and has nothing to do with my own situation. I'm just genuinely be glad for them, because I want them to have success, and I want them to have the spotlight. And it transformed me a little bit in the fact that I just no longer felt like I was chasing anything. I can
Right.
just be, and I think that's important if you can be and not feel like you're always trying to, be like them or be like that, or, just be you and discover you. I think it pays dividends in the long haul.
Yeah. That's such a hard one for me. I'm always what one of the tropes in 12-step is compare and despair.
Mhm.
And oh my God, I have that's a big demon for me. That's one I've done my whole life, constantly comparing myself to the other, my singing peers or this writer or whatever. Just always going, well, why them and not me? And always and
Right.
always what that points to is there's something hurting inside of me. That's what that always points to. And so that's why you got to start there for healing so that you can be delivered from that kind of very self-centered instinct, and to be able to say, oh, my friend, she just got this great freaking tour. I couldn't be happier for her. There was the day when it'd be like, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
But there is hurt happening inside when we're in that state. So you want to address that in order to be able to get out of it. And I'm so much less that way today than I used to be. And I'm so grateful for that. But every day is one more climb up that step, every day I get challenged with that. And I have to decide whether I'm operating from my higher vibration or my lower one, because the lower one can win sometimes. And that's why, like, these principles or any ones that you follow as a sort of self-care ritual are meant to be an ongoing cultivation, because every day new information is passing our way and impacting us. And so there is no such thing as, well, I've arrived, I've done all the good things, and now I'm perfect. It's
Right.
ongoing. It's an ongoing cultivation to keep yourself healthy, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and therefore able to be there better for others, to have true empathy, to have true altruism. Yeah.
And the last one I want to at least mention before we take the break is be of service. And this is something that, again, I felt like so many of these were right in line with a lot of my thinking, which I can't even remember where I picked this up from. I don't know if it was from church or from other studies, but somewhere along the line, I picked up this concept of being subservient every day to somebody, regardless of, just do acts of service every day, regardless of, of what position you're in. And I find that to be really important, because I think it keeps you humble, but two, if all you're doing is taking from other people and you're not giving something, I think it's just, you're missing out on a joy center. Because even though I wouldn't say, I think gift giving and is one of my love languages, but I think acts of service may be as well, because I try to do things for others that has zero benefit for myself, just for the act of just to do something for somebody else. And I don't talk a lot about the stuff I do in public, for random strangers, but it's something that's that's important to me, and I don't do it to say, hey, look what I did, because I don't even mention it. I don't mention it. 9 out of 10 I won't even mention it to Rebecca. It's just something that is personal to me and the person I did the thing for. That's the only two people that need to know about that. The person I did the thing for, and myself. And that's it. And I just thought that, wow, when I was looking, kind of refreshing with these again, I was like, yeah, some of these are just so spot on. And that, I wanted to applaud you and say, if 100 people did these 10 principles, we would have 100 people, uh, you know, better off in the world. And if that 100 became 1,000, and 1,000 became 10,000 became 100,000, I don't think we would see necessarily all the division and the
Sure.
the hate being thrown, every direction, but
Yeah.
sideways,
Yeah.
So I just applaud you for hitting on all the right cylinders on this thing. I just think
Oh, thank you.
it's so elegant and perfect.
Thank
It's just
you.
perfect. So let's take a quick break, and then when we get back, let's get into the depths of the process. Okay.
Awesome.
At Honeybee Creative, great design begins with imagination and ends with impact. Ideas, stories, and brands are brought to life through vibrant illustration, thoughtful graphic design, and visuals crafted with care. Whether you're building something new or refreshing what you have, your project will be engaging, polished, and full of personality. With 25 years of experience in the creative business, Honeybee Creative will help you stand out in a way that's memorable and meaningful. If you are ready to create something fantastic, Honeybee Creative can provide all your creative needs, including outstanding logos, brochures, postcards, and direct mail pieces, book and catalog design, invitations, posters, editorial and product illustration, and even commissioned and custom original artwork for your home or to give as a gift. Discover what sparks your creativity at honeybeecreative.net and email Melissa at melissa@honeybeecreative.net to get your project buzzing. Let's create something fantastic together.
Okay, we're back. And so, Angela, can you please tell our listeners, how did the idea for this book first come about, and kind of what led to saying, okay, I'm going to do this?
Well, it began as an essay 5 years ago. We were in lockdown from COVID, and the world was just just upheaved. And I think a lot of people were panicked. A lot of people were having these spiritual experiences of, oh my God, I'm such an type A, and now I've been forced to stay home, and boy, it's changed my life. And so people had every kind of experience as a result of us having to be in lockdown. And I remember I struggled. And so I started writing down, and I've always been, sort of a seeker, always is trying to seek something spiritual, something that has to do with making me whole again. And, I've always been that person. And so there I went in my mind, and being a writer, and I had a blog, I still have the blog, and going, what do I have to say about what's going on right now? And like what it has become as a book, even back then as an essay, it had everything to do with the world is in upheaval right now. How do we cope with that? And at the time I wrote 7 principles. And so I added 3 more when I wanted a round 10 number, the 10 commandments, the 10 principles. But it began as 7 principles, and it was literally just like a paragraph, just a glimpse or a thought of these ideas. And I put it on my blog. And so fast forward to 2025, and my goodness, the presidency that we have and what it has become, and and you know what? Here's what I've been thinking about even since I put the book out. It's not just impacting us Americans. It is impacting the globe. These gestures and attempts toward moving us in a direction of fascism, that's impacting the globe. And I thought, it's pretty profound. And how do you not just go, I'm out of here, folks. It's been a good life. I'm done. I don't want to be a part of going backwards. How do you keep from doing that? And so at a certain point, I went, what can I do? What can I do? I feel so helpless, other than vote, other than protest, other than write my congressman? What can I do? And then I realized, you're a writer, first of all. So that's where you go when things get tough. So what do you have to say about what's going on right now? And I thought about that blog essay from 5 years ago, and I dug it out and I went, yeah, all of these I've only just given a little thought to. I can certainly expand on each of these principles in a way that might actually be helpful to someone, to help us get our own spiritual center strong enough so that we can respond more mindfully to what's going on. It's not really about changing the world. It's about getting ourselves strong enough to handle. Because if we're mentally struggling, we're not going to respond to what's going on in the world with anything other than, some bad habits and some self-medicating. And so, or turning that outward and starting to feel very violent. It's amazing what this turn and this threat to our democracy and the way people of color have to start looking over their shoulder again, like they did in the 40s and the 50s and Jim Crow. And it's like, what is happening that we're repeating history? And on and on and on. It's easy enough to either say, I'm out of here, I'm checking out, or turn outward and get violent, and get antisocial. And so I thought, people need to find a way to find some peace of spirit. And so I'm just throwing these ideas out because when I work these principles, they work for me. When I work them, they work for me. And so that's another trope of 12-step. It works if you work it. And so I just wanted to put something out there that might help somebody figure out how to be in the world a little bit more peacefully. Because here's the other thing too. Happiness is not derived from an external source. You can say, yes, I'm pretty happy in this life, even with all of this going on, because really what happiness is are you living in your integrity? And so these principles can help us get a little bit closer, I believe, to us living in our integrity. And through that, we are able to find peace of spirit, even if the world is rolling around us, because it makes us stronger to be able to actually react to that, to respond to that in a better way.
I couldn't agree more. And the fact that it's kind of hard if you, in the analogy of drowning, if you are yourself drowning, it's very hard to help somebody else get to the boat.
Right.
To the lifeboat. So you almost have to, you have to center yourself and you have to do something for yourself before you can really help somebody else navigate all this kind of crazy stuff.
Or like in an airplane, put the mask on yourself first.
Right. Yes, that's perfect.
Right. Yeah.
So were there any internal or external obstacles that stood in the way of getting this book out, or was there anything that kind of you saw or that kind of experience that was a roadblock to getting it published?
Well, the imposter syndrome, for sure. I'm someone who has struggled a lot with emotional issues, and it's why I'm in a 12-step, and it's why I am someone who seeks out these kinds of things and always have, is that I'm someone who struggles. So to start, as I'm writing this, I'm like, who am I to be dispensing any kind of, hey, try this? Who am I? So there was a lot of that I fought with. And then ultimately I realized, well, that's every one of us. Every one of us, Deepak Chopra, I'm sure, has had his moments of who am I to be? But ultimately, all we have is our experiences with struggle. That's all we have. And every last one of us on the planet has experience with struggle. So why not you? Why not me? Why not anyone who has a thought and just wants to put that thought out there and say, let's all try this?
Even with trying to start this series, I I wrestled with that myself, is like, who in the heck would want to listen to your silly butt get on here and talk to these people about this stuff? It's just
Right.
that would go through my head. The doubt would go through my head. And then, eventually I get tired of it and going, oh, hell no.
Right.
Yes, I am going to succeed, and I am going to make this work, and I am going to do these things because I can. So therefore,
Yeah.
shut up. Tell my doubts.
Right.
You need to shut up and get in the back seat, like what I told you to. Otherwise, you're going to get the hand
Exactly.
and the slipper.
Yeah, exactly.
That my mom didn't throw shoes. She wasn't a shoe thrower. She was more of a, let me snatch you up and with this giant wooden spoon and let you go. There's that type.
Whatever she had handy.
So this is something that I'm not really sure, because I'm that I'm working on something myself with trying to get something written. How did you know when this was done? How did you know when a piece of work is actually complete and done? You don't have to do any more edits, and simply it's ready for the public.
Oh, I don't know that I ever do. I don't know that I ever do. At a certain point, you just have to go push the button, Max. And at a certain point, because I could indulge and indulge and indulge till the cows come home. And ultimately, I have to recognize that as fear and go, all right, just push the button, Max. Because I think we're our own worst critics, first off. Oh, I can make this better. When you're to the point of, should this be a period or a comma? Maybe it's time to stop. Maybe it's time that it's done, but we can get obsessive that way. Definitely, I can.
And then the last question, as far as the life cycle of this, that I want to ask you about is, has the relationship with the book changed since you've published it? Or is it kind of the same? You view it exactly the same as you did before? Or are you thinking in terms of, is there anything you wish you would have done? Or is it just perfect the way it is?
I really like it. I think it grows on me more every day. Mainly because of feedback I get from it, which has kind of blown me away a little bit. Because
really
when I first put it out, I wanted, first of all, there was a strategy in mind. I wanted a short book because I wanted easy reading. I didn't want to get into concepts in this really deep, complex, convoluted way that would make people go, oh, it's like being in school and doing homework. I'm not interested in that. Didn't want to do that. And the reason I wanted it to be easy principles told easily and short is because I wanted to even grab people who aren't book readers. I really did. I haven't cared about that in the past with the books I've written. Like, if you don't read books, I don't care. But I really want this one to help people. So I wanted to be able to appeal to people who might even go, oh, I don't know about a book. Oh, but it's short and it's easy. Right? So that was very strategic. And then when I put it out, I remember going, my first doubt after publishing was, ooh, is it too easy? Is it simplistic? Are people going to go, oh, it's precious? And I had those moments of doubt. And honestly, what has assuaged that doubt is the feedback I've gotten. And it blows my mind, honestly. How many people, I had a friend call me up as soon as he got the book and read it and said, and we ended up having an 1.5 hour long conversation of him asking me about the forgiveness thing and telling me a story of his about him and a sister. And we just got deep and in it with each other. And I remember getting off the phone and going, oh my God, did that just happen because he read my book? What the hell? And so suddenly my doubt went away and I went, I've done something good. It won't be for everyone. Nothing ever is. It doesn't matter. I've done something good. And so I'm kind of in love with it a little bit, and it's the little engine that could. It's the little book that could.
Yeah, you should be in love with it. It's great.
Oh,
So
thank you.
Angela, I'm going to throw up a couple of images here on the screen. These are your alcohol ink paintings that you do. And my question, which are available on your website, which I'll give a link in the comments down below where you can go visit these and get your very own copy. And I do appreciate that, you've given me one of these as well.
And there's some of the right behind me.
There are, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get into doing these?
I can tell you exactly how. It was 2018 or 19. And I went to an art show with a friend of mine who said, I've got this artist friend. She does this thing called alcohol inks and encaustic wax. I never got into the encaustic wax thing, but she goes, and I'd never heard of either of things. I'm like, what is this? She goes, just come with me. And we went and I was blown away. I was blown away by this woman. Now, her alcohol inks are figuratives. She will have landscapes with trees and mountains. And I don't know how the heck you'd get that from blowing ink around. But so she's on a whole other level. But I remember being so blown away. And I'm a big art fan anyway. I go to a lot of museums. I go to a lot of galleries. But this is the first time that I went to see an art form I'd never heard of. And before I left there, I went, I want to do this. So literally I chatted her up, this artist, and I asked for her card. And it turned out that just 2 days later, she was going to be doing a demonstration of her in action doing alcohol inks at the nearby mall. And it was in my neighborhood. And I went, oh, this was meant to be, I'm going. And I went and I took notes and I asked 1,000 questions. I'm sure I was so obnoxious, but I had gotten obsessed. And I said, I want to start doing these. And, it's considered the brushless art form. Some alcohol ink artists will use brushes, but it is considered the brushless art form. You blow the ink around, and you can do it several ways. You can literally do it with just your breath, or you can do it with like one of those computer cans of air, or I use a blow dryer, so you can blow the ink around. And because of that, there is a certain level of abstract. Well, that's my thing anyway. I love abstract art. And I love the idea of like not really having a whole lot of control over what it's going to do and where it's going to go. And so at the end of some of them, sometimes I'd look at it and go, well, that just looks horrible. And other times I'd go, wow. And it will bring up an image that was not intended. And I love that aspect of it, but the aspect of letting go and letting be. But so once I took that, it wasn't a workshop. It was just a demonstration, but I was taking notes like crazy. And I decided I'm going to go buy some. I'm going to start this. And of course I did that. And I remember the first efforts were like, oh, this is depressing. But I just kept playing and playing and playing until it got less depressing. But I was obsessed. Can't tell you why. It just really, and then the friend who took me to this art exhibit, she ended up starting it too. And then we'd actually get together and we'd like play at her house, and we both do alcohol inks. And that was smacking right up against just about a few months before we went into COVID lockdown. So that was cut short, our ritual of weekly getting together and doing alcohol inks together. But it really became something I loved doing. And I actually a friend of mine ended up booking me on a couple of, whole different friend, booking me on a couple of like mall things where you have different entertainment going on, and you have chalk artists and you have clowns and you have whatever. And she said, demonstrate your alcohol inks. And I said, well, I just begun this. I'm not good enough to do this. And she goes, hey, you want to make $100 an hour? Yes, I'll be there.
I do believe I'm real good at it now.
And so I did that. And I have to tell you, this magical moment that told me I am doing the right thing here is on most of the day, because people are just walking the mall and doing their thing. Most of the day I'm ignored, and I'm just in my own, in my own heaven and making cool art. And at one point, this little girl comes over and she stays and stares forever. And her mother's like, come on, it's time to go. And she's like, no, I want to watch this. So then her family came over and waited for her patiently, and she was obsessed. And then it brought other people over, and she's asking me questions. And that was the moment that I went, this is very cool. Other people, somebody else was drawn in the way I had been drawn in at that first art exhibit. And I loved that. And I've just been doing it ever since. And again, I just like the abstract quality of it, that I don't know what it's going to be. I'm either going to like it at the end or I'm not. But even ones that I haven't liked, I've kept, because I will show them to someone and that'll be the one that someone likes, is the one I hate, because that's the beautiful nature of abstract.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I got into it. Yeah.
Sure. Well, the last thing I want to see if I can't get you to do is, would it be possible for you to maybe grab a poem that you wouldn't mind sharing with everybody?
Oh, I would love to. Oh, okay. Let me find something. Fortunately, I keep all this stuff on my computer like the nerd I am. So this one is called Girls Named Vanessa Show Up and Show Out. And I want to explain the title before I do the poem. The reason the name Vanessa is in the title is because the painted lady butterflies that are like little miniature versions of the monarch, they are also called, their Latin name is Vanessa Cardui. So that's the reference. And again, the name of the poem is Girls Named Vanessa Show Up and Show Out. The swarm of painted ladies showers me unexpectedly, landing on skin that blankets with silk gauze of wingly flutters, a hallowed baptism. Smack dab on the sidewalk of Ventura Boulevard, carrying with them in their spiritual lightness and artful scales the flitter of renewal, restoration, redemption. A salve for my spiritual heaviness and plucked scales, a phenomenon that produces crucifixional arms in anyone caught by one of its murmurations. Some have said their arrival in massive numbers and a migration much earlier than the usual late spring are climate change induced, a thought that jerks a sadness from this chance christening. Though for me, a girl with campaigns launched left and right toward healing my soul, a girl awfully in love with finding angels in every nook, too early couldn't be more right on time.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Love it. So tell everybody, where can they go to find more information about you, and what's next for Angela Carole Brown? Any projects you got in the works?
Yes, I've been rewriting this play that may eventually allow me to call myself a playwright if it ever gets produced. And I do have someone who is planning to produce it, our friend Bob Paisley. And so working on that, and I recently got Ross involved to write very crucial music, because the play is about a composer. So we've got to be able to hear some music in this play experience. So I'm working on that. I've recently had a spell just in the past 30 days of some great luck regarding my writing and getting things placed. So like, first off, I've got a feature spread and an interview about How the Light Gets In. That's by Flapper. That's going to be published this month by Flapper Press Arts and Entertainment, which is an online magazine. A poem of mine called Between Skin and Bone has been nominated for a Best of the Net in Poetry. So we'll see, what happens with that. There's a brand new poem of mine called The Garden of the Body that recently got picked to be in a poetry anthology entitled Bards Against Hunger. And it's a Kansas City thing. So that's kind of cool. And then the last thing is the most recent notice of publication is a creative nonfiction story of mine got accepted by a journal called Midnight and Indigo, and it's a literary journal for Black women writers. And that's going to be published. So all these, my writing is getting some love right now, which I'm really excited about. And what else? That's enough. I feel very bountiful and blessed, frankly. Yeah.
Yes. Well, you are a dynamo, and I can't thank you enough for joining me and doing this with me. Hopefully, people know you a little bit better, and they'll reach out. And if you don't have your copy already, folks, go out and get this. How the Light Gets In by Angela Carole Brown. Thank you, Angela Carole. I appreciate you.
You.